if you think we are announcing way too much about new immigrants, I just wanted to throw this out there. There are times where you have to try to get creative and create something, platform, intersections, opportunities to reach people. Like, you have to put a lot of effort into trying to find people that you could reach for God. And there are situations where you're putting so much effort, but the result is actually really weak. Then there's also a different situation where it's completely opposite. There's like this wave that arises that you had nothing to do with, and you're just able to spot it. And it comes down to a decision whether you're going to acknowledge that wave and understand that it's something that God is doing and you can be a part of, or it's something that's just going to go right past. And so that's why we're announcing it over and over. We are watching a wave happen over the last 2 years, and it's continuing right now, where we as a church have an opportunity to reach people with the gospel in the simplest of ways. And I'm just going to mention this. This announcement was made at the last service. After the service, 4 people came up. Two married couples came up. They were still in the clothes that they came from the former country in. They actually arrived in Sacramento 2 days ago. They were released from the border 2 days ago. Brand new in the church listening to this announcement. The point is just things like that that confirm to us that this is something that as a church, we got to unite behind and take advantage of these moments to bless people. Not take advantage of them, of people, take advantage of the moment to bless them and allow God to speak and reach them if God wants to through it. So God bless you as you participate in that ministry. All right, Happy New Year. I know this is the season of resolutions. Every single person that's been on stage has mentioned that word. It is a season of new goals, new resolutions, new commitments. And I agree with what Nayla said in the beginning. It is a good thing. The reason we kind of, embark on a lot of ambitious plans and ideas in January is because we want to grow. That's a very healthy thing. Some people settle down and they just kind of settle for the status quo. But then there are people who actually are trying to grow. They're trying to go, listen, what can I do to improve myself, improve the impact I have for God, improve my family life, all of those things. And that's why we have this January joking, resolutions, goals. And then there are people who take it seriously and actually do it. All of that we do for the sake of growth. It is tied to the time. As people kind of turn that calendar, they turn the page from December to January, they also want to turn a page on their life. And I think it is a special time to talk about that because it's all for the sake of growth. That being said, you know that we like to be pretty honest up here, and I'd want to be honest regarding resolutions, goals, and commitments that come in January. I saw somebody post that, your New Year's resolutions are usually for the first week of January. They're limited to that. They have an expiration date past the first week. And the jokes like that are created because it's based on personal experience. And we realize, most of us that have, gone through the process 15 times, 10 times, 8 times of taking resolutions seriously, putting thought into it, and start embarking on some path, we realize that most of the time these resolutions don't really lead to practical growth. They improve our life. There's some measure of success, but in general, usually it does not live up to what we expect. I look at my experience. I've gone through multiple times where I had very vibrant Januaries where I'm like, look, I'm getting down to this. I found an inspiring new shiny app that helps me visualize my goals and projects and helps me keep track of my to-dos, or I'll buy something. I don't know if you're like me, but there are times where I walk into Staples. That store is open. It still exists. You walk into Staples and you'll get this brand spanking new calendar. Yes, you have it on your phone, your laptop. You have it everywhere, even in your Gmail account. But still, you get that paper calendar and it looks so good and looks so empty and so promising, and you're inspired. And I've gone through those things just like everybody else. But every single time I've gone through that, I've realized that despite the benefits of going through it and making all of these resolutions, the long-term picture does not really improve too much. In fact, I actually started noticing that there's a pattern to how we approach growth. Can I get somebody young here who would be willing to come up as a volunteer? Anybody young? I look in this section. Well, you decide if you're young. No, that's. Can I just get a volunteer? Somebody, come on. Anybody? There we go. All right. See, you're a good man. I love this guy. Pastor Vlad, can you bring me my nephew's toys? I borrowed this. If you're watching, I will wipe it down after. But this is a little example that I want to show because I think it really highlights kind of what happens. And you've seen something like this probably many times. If I can get this bag open, I'll show you. But there's something that happens. There's a pattern that I've watched emerge over and over when it comes to approaching growth only through creating resolutions, goals, and plans, or more accurately, to-do lists. And here's the way that it works. You get inspired. You do something about it. You put some time aside. You start thinking. You use a new app or a new tool to help you visualize everything and kind of get the lay of the land of your life and where you want to be. You visualize your goals and you write them down. You kind of write down the areas of your life that you're looking to improve. You kind of write down, give yourself a grade of where you're at in each area. And after all of this, it comes time for implementation. And this is where kind of the pattern really starts growing. Every year I see this. There's the implementation stage, and you start creating to-do lists. And if you're really good at this, you create to-do lists with titles, and you have not just one to-do list, you have sections of it. And you start going, okay, based on everything I know, here's what I need to do. So I'll give you a few examples. If we're going to be talking about my personal growth, and I'm talking about building my life, growing, right? I need to exercise 3 times a week. It's hard, I know. I got to exercise 3 times. That's usually what happens with that one. I got some bad habits that I realize I have, and I got to take care of those. One of my worst things is that I eat once a day. And my sleep pattern's screwed up. Life does not work like that, my friend. You don't get to fit all of this nicely together. You get to hold it. You're just trying to figure it out. But I need to fix my sleep schedule. The other thing is I don't really have time to eat at home too often, so I got to figure that out and eat maybe 30% less. If I'm ambitious, maybe 30. All right, fine, 10%. Let me see if I can cut 10%. Just for sanity's sake, I need a hobby. And I need to have that hobby regularly, all right? So that's something that I really got to make sure for my own personal growth. Now, if I'm going to talk a little bit about my spiritual growth and the to-do list, I guarantee most people here, this is somewhere on your list or on lists from your previous year. I got to pray more, at least once a day. Come on. I mean, is that too much to ask of a Christian? Or how about read the Bible? If you want to cheat, you can just do the biblical kind of the Bible plans, You just read like a verse and somebody else's thoughts on it. I mean, it's almost like reading the Bible. Hey, new year, 2022. I know God got plans for this year. God has a plan for me. I got to figure out what God wants out of me during this year. You know what I mean? I think that's important for each one of us. I don't want to just do this religiously. I've been intending to open a small group for 3 semesters now. I'm going to do it. By the way, this is not me. I'm just giving you examples. When I think about my family, I want to switch kind of gears to family. I don't want to just hang out with my family. I want to at least have one God moment with my family, at least once a week. Is that, once again, too much to ask? No. My wife, I got to go on dates. I mean, come on. I know you love me, baby. I know you do. And I know we need to go, now I'm being honest. We got to go out more often. For some of you, I got to find a spouse. Goodness gracious. Dates, family time, cool. Romance. Hold this one carefully. Romance is huge, okay? Some spontaneity, some creativity, right? I got to add that into my life. Every summer goes by, my kids get older, and I'm like, man, we should have had an epic trip. I used to do those with 1825. Why not do it with my kids? Let's do something like that. I got to take advantage of it. I got to focus on my family growth. Work. Oh, man, work. Here you go. That's not a cup, by the way. Work. There are so many projects that are behind. That's okay. There's some awesome people that I work with. I need to spend more time investing into their life. I got to invest more into them. Some new ideas that I've been meaning to try for growth. Or maybe, you know what? It's time to buckle down. I want to really buckle down and work for that promotion and for that raise, okay? I think that's something that, speaking of work, we've been talking about witnessing at work. How many times? I need to, at least this next year, preach or share the gospel or just say God bless you to somebody. I mean, let's make a move here, right? What about my home? If you don't clean the garage once a week, I mean, you know what happens. Springtime, yard work, if you don't mow once a week, if you don't stay on top of it, it just takes over. You know those cabinets that your wife has been asking you about for 3 years? You know what I'm talking about. Or how about that remodel she's been thinking about? You know what I'm talking about, right? Couple more. 2022. Who knows what the future will bring? It's about time to plant that garden. I mean, hey, if I can't buy it at Costco, I can grow it. It's okay. Hey, some of you, you're a $90,000 car that you invested into, but wash once a month, at least once a week. Come on. Hey, you dropped something. Good luck. Now, for the rest of the year, you just get to walk around. But watch the stairs, because life has a way of kind of coming at you and things kind of, you know, it's not all pretty all the time. But once in a while, you know, you'll drop something. But friends, really, really long example. But you could just drop it. Thank you, my friend. Can you guys give him a hand? He's a good man. You could leave it. You leave it. It's all part of the decor. It's supposed to be like this. The point is that it's a pattern that emerges. We create these lists. Not one of the things that I read out loud just now was bad or extra. Not one. All of them were important. They covered a wide array of things that I care about, and all of them are competing. And so what I notice is, after reflection, after laying it all out, I create these to-do lists, and I can hold on to them, but somewhere over time, something starts falling apart. Something gets dropped here, something gets dropped there, and what you don't realize is that you don't usually control what gets dropped. It just drops, and you don't even realize it until, like Nayla said, you look back in your thing at the end of the year, you're like, oh, shoot, I forgot about that one. It just kind of falls out. And then if you're really trying to do this well, you start creating to-do lists of catching up on your to-do lists. And you're just moving stuff around, all around. And in the end, a lot of times, you just realize it's the same old me. New year, same old me. And that's just how it is. At the end of the day, a lot of our approach to growth ends up with disappointment. And not because we don't grow. We do. Every single one of us, we have things that we look back every year and go, man, I grew in that. I set out to do that. I did that. And that's all great. But if we're talking about real growth, if we're talking about growth with a vision, that's really difficult to do. Why? Because for every area that you grow in, you'll drop another area without realizing it. And when that stuff happens by itself, just because you can't carry it all and things just fall apart, you're not controlling what you're actually investing into. And a lot of times what you end up investing into is the stuff that's easy. A lot of times what ends up happening is sometimes you celebrate the success of growth in one area while not realizing that an even more important area you forgot about. And even though that's good, yes, it is good, when it comes to real growth and sustainable growth, you realize it's not growth with a vision. It's growth with just whatever I can get done in time, because that's the way that it works. And so here's the thing. No matter how well planned out your to-do list is, no matter how great everything is and how well you execute, usually does not lead to the sustainable type of growth that you expect. Why? Because our approach of adding in order to grow is not the only way to grow. It's the most obvious way, but it's not the most effective way. especially if you live in this country where you have no time as it is. Our growth doesn't just happen through addition. I think the path to our growth for you and me is actually through subtraction. It's actually through subtraction. And so that's what we're trying to talk about today. And I'm just doing an introduction today. That's all I'm doing to a sermon series that we're going to be doing over the next 4 or 5 weeks. What we're going to be talking about is that no matter how good everything is on your list, no matter how great and how important everything is, you have to understand that you are limited. Your needs, your goals are unlimited. If you open your eyes, there's plenty to work on. But you, in your resources, are extremely limited. And this is the part that kills growth right off the bat, without you even thinking about it. Real growth begins with that truth being fully recognized and received. And those are two different things. You have to understand that you are extremely limited as a person with your resources. See, growth requires resources. It does. There's no way around it. Nothing grows in and of itself. You have to invest into it. And just like 2 hands can only control so much, you only have so much that you can invest. See, if you want to truly excel in any one of these spheres that you have in your journal right now or on your to-do list, if you truly want to excel, not just mark it off to say that you did it so you feel better, but actually grow in it, you have to invest in some crazy stuff. And I want to just list them because I want to make it as practical as possible. Besides the fact that you need to invest time and energy into each one of these goals, you have to invest your emotions. You understand that anything that you actually care about, you're going to need to invest your emotions into it. Not just when you're making the goal. See, we get inspired, we see a need, there's an emotional response, we're like, this is important enough to write down. But if you want to invest into it, you have to sustain that emotional investment all throughout, or else you stop caring. Or else it fades from your mind. You have to even invest your emotions into what you want to grow. You have to worry about it. You have to dream about it. You have to have passion for it. You have to invest your attention. Your attention that you can barely keep together throughout your day. You actually have to invest your attention. You have to remember it. You have to keep it on your mind, because if you don't, even the to-do lists become faded and you don't really pay attention to them. You got to invest your talent. To tackle the real stuff, you have to invest the talents that God gave you in order to grow. You got to get creative. You know that your creativity is extremely limited. It's limited to 2 to 3 hours a day. That you have the ability to be really creative about something. Creativity takes a lot of energy, and it usually happens during the most productive part of your day, which is 2 to 3 hours that you can have creativity and for it to actually be interesting and good. So you have to invest your creativity. You have to invest your willpower. That's a limited thing that you have. And you have to obviously invest money and resources into most goals. See, all of these things, you only have so much of. Your creativity, your passion, your emotion, your willpower, all of those things, your attention, are extremely valuable resources. And when you approach growth, there's no end. I could keep filling this bag over and over and over and keep going. But when you approach growth that's that big, with the limited resources you have, usually you end up just giving a little bit to everything and it ends up nothing. And so when something that you have is limited, it becomes valuable. And if it's valuable because it's very limited, the real thing that you have to focus on, and the most important aspect, is how you choose to allocate that resource. See, a lot of people don't think about that you actually choose how to allocate your resource. Most of us don't even think about it, and it's chosen for us on inertia. But you actually have the power to choose how to allocate these valuable resources. I was reading about Britain in World War II. World War II was not just won by brave soldiers. Who was the most brave, who had the most crafty, strategy, who had the best, generals. And that's not what won the war. That's what usually, you see. That's what makes good movies and good stories. And yes, 100% that matters. But the war actually can be won or lost before you even get to a battlefield. For example, in Britain, one of the most limited resources of World War II that every country was fighting for, there were two. Number one was steel. Number two was food. Steel was a limited resource. And Britain had a committee in the government that their sole responsibility was to allocate the valuable resource of steel. They made decisions of how much steel to send where. So think about it. The army needed steel for what? Tanks. The Air Force needed steel for airplanes. The Navy needed steel for their ships and boats. All of them were important. All of them needed it. All of it was for the war effort. Every single one of them had a case to make to say, listen, we need more of this. But it's a valuable resource that's very limited. So this committee would have to choose. And here's the crazy thing. No matter how brave, no matter how good of a strategy, if the person making the decision of allocating resources made the wrong decisions, you have a strategy of, attacking the enemy through the land, but those resources were allocated to the Navy. You don't have enough tanks. You already lost the war. That's how important this moment is in growth. In fact, one more negative story. That same committee made a mistake. They had another valuable resource, food. And they took food from all of their colonies to feed the soldiers, except for they messed up with the allocation of that resource. They took a bunch of food from India, and they gave it and stored it for their soldiers, and they had a surplus in the army of food. But the people that they took it from, in this case it was India, 3 million people died from starvation. Just because a committee made the wrong decision of how to allocate a valuable limited resource. This is very important if you actually want to grow. Here's the thing. The pursuit of growth, it's not just about identifying goals and things that are important. All of it is. It's about proper allocation of resources. But if you're going to talk about proper allocation of resources, it's just as much about where you're not sending resources as it is to where you choose to invest them. I want you to understand this. If you want to be good at allocating resources, you need to become better at choosing where not to send your resources. And that's what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. We're going to be talking about something that we call necessary endings. There's a book by Dr. Henry Cloud called Necessary Endings that I would highly recommend for each person here to buy, read, or listen to. But the point is that we want to talk about the fact that there are things in your life that are important, good, and it could even be a story of like prosperity in your life. But because of your limited resources, you're going to have to choose to cut it. You don't feel like it. You don't want it. It may not make sense at first glance. But strictly because you have limited resources, it will necessarily have to end. And the only way it'll end is if you end it. See, what we're talking about in the next few weeks is the concept of pruning. Pruning. Pruning is to cut something, not to hurt a plant. So in this case, if we're talking about a plant, you're pruning a plant. You don't cut it to hurt it or to remove something that is so good for it. You're talking about cutting something off for the sake of growth. It's a positive thing, but it's a very painful thing. And if it's done wrong, it can damage the plant. If it's done in the wrong season, it could even kill the plant. But when done right, it is the very reason why that plant grows. I wanted to mention one thing before I talk a little bit about pruning itself. Everything starts with understanding who we are. A lot of times when people talk about growth, they think that they can goal their way, resolute their way into being a business owner, into being the guy who makes a ton of money, into being the most successful person. And I understand we live in the West. It's a meritocracy most of the time. But meritocracy is not just opportunity for everyone. Meritocracy means that power is given to those who have the abilities. People who are warranted with that power. So yes, our opportunities are limitless in the U.S., but for those who have the abilities. If you're going to start talking about pruning, you have to first understand who you are. So many people get disappointed, and this is not popular to say. People get disappointed because their goals and their dreams, I'm sorry, but are unrealistic. And sometimes they're so unrealistic that the only thing you will walk away with is disappointment, and you're going to hate yourself. You're going to feel like the worst failure. That's why the Bible tells us that we have to learn to be humble about ourselves. In fact, Jesus shares this example and says that even when you go to a wedding, and he's just illustrating a mindset. He says, when you go to a wedding, don't sit in the place of honor. Don't go to the front. Because if somebody comes more honorable than you, they'll ask you to move to the back. He says, no, have the mindset to sit in the back and have them ask you to sit in the front. And he was just talking about a mindset. And that's where growth starts. It's understanding that we don't choose the abilities that we were born with. We don't choose all of those things. As much as we would love to think that we can achieve everything, we can't. We have certain resources that God gave us. In fact, when Jesus talks about us, you know what he says? He doesn't even call us trees or plants that need to be pruned. He says the gardener is God. The actual plant, the vine, is me. Jesus says that. Jesus is the vine. We are just branches on the vine. We don't get to choose what kind of branch we are. Remember that story about the servants, right, that the master gave talents to? They didn't choose the abilities that warranted them to receive either 1 talent, 3, or 5. But they received it. We have to understand that and go, look, if I want to grow, I got to start with being realistic. But that's the beauty of it. If you start realistic, God says if you're faithful in the small, you will grow. So here's why I'm saying this. Look at what God wants to focus on. And I want you to understand this is from John chapter 15, verse 1 and 2. I'm the true vine, my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. Our job is not to try to become something we're not. Our job is to become the best version of who we are, who God created us to be. See, he did not go, I'm going to prune you off and I'm going to put you on some other tree. Or I'm going to, no. God's goal is take you as a branch and to prune you in such a way that you as a branch can bring the maximum amount of fruit. If you don't understand this, then you don't understand what kind of plant you are. See, if you're going to look at your schedule and go, man, I have so many resolutions, which ones do I prune? Which ones do I put as top priority, second, third, fourth priority? How do I cut amazing ideas, but because I don't have the time for it? How do I do it? If you don't know who you are, what kind of plant you are, then you won't know what to prune. You prune a vine, a grapevine, differently than an orange tree. Yes, the process is the same, but the art of it is completely different. And same thing with the rose bush. It's pruned differently. So it starts with understanding who you are. But so you don't control who God created you to be, but you do have control of the pruning process so that you can bring more fruit. God prunes us. Now, what is this pruning process? I only have about 10 minutes, but I want to share so that we can be ready for the rest of the sermons coming up. What is pruning? Pruning is the proactive process of cutting off branches and twigs or buds on a plant. It's not done to hurt it. It's done for the well-being of that plant. Take a rose bush, for example. Can we put up that first picture of the rose bush? If you look at that rose bush, it's green. It doesn't look like it lacks sunlight. It doesn't look like it lacks water. It has everything that it needs. But if you look at how many flowers are on that plant, if you just look at this, and this is the only picture you saw, you're like, that looks pretty good. But I want you to see the next picture. Same bush, same size bush. But look at the difference of how much fruit, how many flowers this bush produces. And the difference between why this bush is so fruitful versus the other one is not, like I said, because of lack of water or more water or sunshine. It's not. This is only possible with somebody who knows how to prune that bush. The only difference between this one and the other one is the way, even the type of rose is exactly the same. There's not some different type of flower or different type of rose. It's exactly the same. The only difference is one is pruned, one is not. And here's the thing, just like the first one, if we can go back to that first photo, it doesn't look bad. It looks healthy. It's green, it's grown, it's not, but it has no vision. There's no vision for growth. There's nobody that has the art of pruning figured out. Why settle for this when you can have something so much more? If you do not prune your life, you will not grow to your maximum, to what God can have for you. There is no way around it. You have so much more potential. That's what God said. That if you bear fruit, God will prune you so that you can bring more fruit. So if God prunes us, if master gardeners know how to prune, we have to learn how to prune our lives practically as well. See, pruning is a tool that gets the most out of a single plant by doing the following things. Here's why certain things get pruned. And these are just basic rules for you to think about. People who are masters at pruning, they prune off dead branches. Dead branches aren't just ugly for the plant. No. They do something far worse. They are taking up space that a good branch could take. There are things in your life that you've been doing for years. There are things that you've been putting your resources into for years without realizing that it doesn't produce fruit. It's a dead area. And it's time to cut it off. And until you do, you will not bring fruit. You are wasting resources that we mentioned before. Somebody who knows how to prune prunes decaying branches that can infect the rest of the plant. There are things that are important in your life, but right now, they're not good for you. There are good things and good goals and lofty ideas that you wish you can have, but pursuing them, it's just maybe the season's wrong, maybe it's just a little bit too much, but all it does is it creates disappointment, and all you see is how you can't live up. And you know what it does? It infects the rest of your goals. It just kills your desire to grow. And it makes you just kind of you got to prune that. It's not bad to have those goals, but it's not helping you. That's an area to prune. You need to prune areas that are sick and not getting better. There are things that, you know what, you're doing it, you're working on. Maybe there are relationships that you have in your life that are good, they're okay. They're not necessarily great, but they're just kind of there, but you don't feel like they're healthy. And they're not improving. No matter how many years you've sunk into that project or whatever it may be, you need to prune that. Pruning is not just cutting off bad things. What we're really talking about is cutting off good things for the sake of better things. A master pruner is somebody who is even willing to prune healthy buds. Why? Because there's something better. To get to that level of a rose bush that you saw, that was not just cutting off bad things. That was cutting off good things so that there could be something better. That's an art that God has to teach us. But the pruning, we have to do. We have to do those things. See, if we practice this, pruning trains us, and pruning when it comes to a plant, it trains the plant to grow properly. It creates a culture of improvement. It becomes something that is normal. You normalize improvement and healthy growth. Some of us, we have things in our life that are healthy and good, but they need to be pruned just because they create a bottleneck. They take a disproportionate amount of our resources. I think these are the two hardest things that I find to prune in my life. There are things that are good and healthy and produce beautiful results. But the way that they're growing, they impede, even with the good results, they impede on the growth of the rest. And you and I have to figure out, what is it in our life? Are there things that are good, but they're impeding on growth elsewhere? We have to understand. I'll give you an example. Some people invest heavily into their children. Some people don't invest anything into their kids. They just work, come home, and that's it. Some people put the extra work in, and they have their kids going to piano lessons. They have their kids playing sports. They're going to all the games. They're coaching. They're practicing. They're doing all of those things. That's an amazing thing. That's a good thing. But if that's the reason your kids can't go to church, can't be in a small group, if that's the reason why you can't be in a small group, and you're never in church besides Sunday, I think that's an area that's impeding growth everywhere else. See, it's an art form. Here's the last one. I was I was on a train going through Colorado, and when you get to the Continental Divide, there's a tunnel. It's a 6.4-mile tunnel. And this tunnel is amazing. It was built over 100 years ago. But what was fascinating is before you get to the tunnel, you see this town out the window. You see this town, and it's beautiful. There's all these buildings. There's a school, and everything's from over 100 years ago. But it's in such good condition. And you see all of the effort that went in to build all of these buildings. How they surveyed everything, how they planned all the town out, how they invested into the materials, how they built all of this town out. But as you ride through, it's completely empty. It's a deserted town. But the reason why it was built was to serve a purpose for a season. Sometimes the things that God calls us to prune, sometimes the things that we need to focus and prune are things that we once nurtured. Things that we once heavily invested into. And they are good. But the season passed. All of those buildings, all of that wasn't waste. Just because it's empty today, it was necessary for a season so that all those workers and their families could live there as it took time to build the tunnel. And when that time was done, you prune it. That's hard to do because it feels almost like you're failing or letting something down or someone down. This applies to everything, your relationships, some of the people, some of the coworkers, for a season. I look back, just my last example. I look back at my time after the first thing that I did, I got out of high school and I went with my dad into business. Just 19 years old, trying to figure it out. And I went into the business with my dad, and it was not something that I did for long. And it ended in a painful way for both me and my dad, because I felt called into ministry, and so it took me a while to come to this moment where I would say yes, and I had to prune this business. When we were opening it, there was a lot of joy, there was a lot of interest, there was these dreams like, hey, we could build this up and make something. There's other people around us that are doing this with their father-son kind of business I model. It works, and there's so much potential, and there's one type of joy, and then there was investment, and then there were a couple years put into that, and then there was ministry, and there came time to cut it. Extremely painful. And I remember somebody sharing this story and somebody asking me, so do you think you made the wrong decision by going into business? Did God have to maybe correct you and pull you out of that? I said, no. Because when I look back, that season served an insane purpose. It took me from a kid in high school to somebody who understands that the world works differently. When you have to make contracts with older people and you're 19 years old and you have a squeaky voice, all of those kinds of things and experiences and taking responsibility and working with people and dealing with phone calls. And it took me from a place where I had low self-esteem to a place where I kind of was like, okay, it's doable. It served a purpose. And then it was pruned. What we want to do, if we can stand up, what we want to do over the next 4 weeks after this is go into a little bit more detail. Go into detail to talk about why pruning is important, how to prune, and then we want to go into some of the priorities. Because there are God-ordained priorities, God-given priorities to each and every person who would call themselves a Christian. Jesus himself said that, listen, I'm the vine, you're the branch. And I got plans for fruit. And if you're going to stay connected, you're going to produce fruit. If you won't be connected, you're going to be a dead branch on the ground. All that's going to be good is to throw you in the fire. The idea is that God has certain things that he laid out as priorities, and we need to prune. And here's what I want to challenge you with over the next 4 weeks. is not to come to church just to hear messages. I want you to take the challenge to pray and seek and allow God to speak to you about your life. Because here's the thing. It is such an individualized approach. You don't have just one approach to a garden full of rose bushes. You have an individual approach to each rose bush. Based on that bush, based on what's going on there. And same thing here. Some of the things that you need to prune, other people are being called to invest into. Some of the things that you are being called to invest your resources into, God is asking your friend or your neighbor or somebody that you know to prune that. And if you do not find God's plan for you, you're going to be swayed by this. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to a visionless growth track. There is no vision. There is no purpose. It's just, I just want to get better. And it's like, yeah, you get better. But is that the best use of the resources God gave you? And so what we're going to do is we're going to ask for the next 4 weeks for you to pray, to seek God, to allow him to give you input, to examine your life, to look at the resolutions, especially those of you who already have them written down, and to go, okay, God, teach me how. Some of the things you're going to hear here over the next 4 weeks will help you. Maybe buying the book, Necessary Endings, will help you. But nothing's going to help you if you do not take the time to prayerfully approach this and go, God, okay, help me so that I'm not wasting more resources and I'm not wasting more time just trying to grow because it's January. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much. I am, once again, God, I'm grateful, God, that you get involved into the details of our lives. It feels almost like you condescend into my questions. You humble yourself to such a degree to care about my little goals, my little questions, but you do. I want to thank you, Father, for giving each and every one of us such a magnificent and glorious word. You give us access to contemplate on the mysteries of your word, to contemplate on the glory of who you are, even just by searching the scriptures, spending time in your presence, and we get to be in that. And at the same time, you take that word and you just boil it down to our practical life. Lord, you literally take that word and make it a light for my next step. And that's not something I can invent. That's not something I can imagine. That's only something you can reveal. And so I pray, God, over the next few weeks, as we go through this series, that you will bless every person in our church, that you will bless every person here, you will bless me, so that we can learn the art of pruning and that we can hear directly from you what we need to cut, what good things we need to cut so that better things can start. Thank you, Jesus. We love you. Amen. Church, God bless you, and we're going to see you guys next Sunday. Happy New Year.